a set of steps from a past may lead to a present or now moment, that is where the relationship ends. There is no causal, in that sense, relationship in the present from the past. There is no effect that the past can have on the present until you say or you determine that it does. For in that now moment, you then create the effect from a quote-unquote seeming past, but you create it right here, right now. So therefore, yes, you feel the effect seemingly of a past, but it is not from the past itself having a hold on you. It is from your interpretation in the moment, your attitude in the moment, and ultimately your actions in the moment. Or if those actions reflect a high degree of belief that the past does, in that sense, affect the present, then you create an effect that seems to provide the evidence that it does, that seems to continuously provide a rationale that the past does affect the present. But that is merely something that you do in the now moment. Therefore, the now moment is always your point of power. For since you always ever exist in the now, it is always eternally right now. You can always change your reality right now, for there is no other time. When you are willing to begin to look at that, you are not remembering a past that is quote-unquote still there, but recreating the past from the present right now. You will understand that right now is all that matters. Right now is the point at which you make any determination or relationship to a past or a future. So right now is the time that you can change that idea. Your particular manifestation, physically speaking, of your reality results generally from three steps. Number one, in a given now moment from a given set of circumstances, you have an interpretation. In general, you will ascribe a positive or negative interpretation to a particular given situation. Now understand the situation in and of itself is a blank set of props with no built-in meaning. You assign the meaning, and if it is something that is generally societally labeled bad, and you then buy into that and automatically label it negative, then you cannot help in that sense but get a negative effect from that neutral source. But the opposite is also true. It is always your choice in any given now moment to remember that the symbol that the event has really no built-in meaning until you assign it. And that perhaps, yes, there are certain aspects of a given situation which may on the surface seem negative. That is not the only thing or the only message that the circumstance has built into it. For when we say all situations are neutral, that neutrality is expressed as 100% potentiality for a negative manifestation, but also 100% potentiality for a positive. And this means that are you to ascribe a positive meaning to something which you heretofore have ascribed a negative meaning to, you cannot help but get a different effect out of it. For in, again, each now moment, what you do is interpret from that blank set of props whether you, in that sense, will choose, perhaps sometimes not consciously, but now we are speaking of being conscious, label it negative or positive. Now we have said that in that sense, step one in each now moment is your interpretation. Once you interpret something as either perhaps negative or positive, you then assume an attitude with that particular interpretation as a foundation. So therefore, again, to extrapolate, if you give a negative interpretation, in general, we'll assume a negative attitude. If you give a positive interpretation, then that's more likely to assume a positive attitude. doing of that thing right now that creates your reality, that manifests your reality physically in the actions that are the movers of that thing in your physical world right now. Therefore, you always in any given now moment have the opportunity, have the advantage to understand that you get to choose the interpretation. You get to choose. For regardless of whether or not, in that sense, you do consciously decide to choose or not, choose you will. Though perhaps if it is from a negative perspective, the choice will be somewhat automatic and unconscious. What we are discussing is waking up in the now moment, the only time you ever exist. In any given situation, when you find yourself with, shall we say, an outdated interpretation, an interpretation that, oh no, here it comes again, for example, is a negative interpretation, presupposing that that is rather than from. And when in that case you say, oh no, it's not, that is the interpretation which is negative, shall we say, backhand, and therefore don't in a negative attitude, and your actions or perhaps blatantly manifest or represent that negative attitude. You can always, in that sense, take back your point of time. You can always, in that sense, create a, shall we say, gap or a lag or a pause between the interpretation and the action. Or again, if your interpretation is, shall we say, negative, and in that sense you assume a negative attitude, but you then do nothing, you cannot then get the negative manifestation. It is the doing stage, in that sense, that creates the reality. So therefore, this gives you the liberty, the license to think whatever you wish, as long as you do not automatically then act with those thoughts as a foundation. Therefore, you can now begin to reinterpret according to preference. You can now understand, all right, something perhaps which in the past I have labeled negative is occurring. Obviously, I can see what is negative about it. In the past, when I have interpreted it this way, had my attitude before my actions, I have only gotten a negative result out of it. Therefore, I have absolutely nothing to lose by at least placing a pause before I do, and giving myself the opportunity in that sense to reinterpret from the perspective of a creator, of a conscious manifestation. And you can always reinterpret something which you had initially assigned a negative meaning or label to by asking yourself the simple wild card question. Wild card meaning you can pull it out of your deck anytime. How does this serve me exactly the way it is? In what way is this symbol that I have created of assistance to me? What is it, for instance, forcing me to look at? What is it, for instance, indicating about what I still may believe in a limiting sense? You can always, by simply asking, how is this of service to me exactly the way it is, get at least some negative, shall we say, alternative option. In other words, some positive interpretation. For if you look at how it serves you, or what it, shall we say again, forces you in that sense to look at it, you can then simply consciously derive that service, or consciously to look at what you have created a symbol to force you to look at, because you wish to look at it, and then no longer need the symbol to prod you from behind. The now moment is truly your point of power, for it is eternal. It always was right now. Never was there a time where you could say it is not right now. And in that sense, so that shall by extension continue. in that sense, be responsible for integrating every aspect of it in a tenuous and tortuous manner. For when in that sense you simply begin to derive your actions and your creatorhood from the now moment, you automatically
between any two objects. And these are called the meat of the objects, and it's often written X with a little wedge Y, and this means that this is the largest thing that is, the largest thing that precedes X and precedes Y both. And if there is such a greatest lower bound, it means that anything that precedes X and Y has to precede X meet Y. And it also has the least upper bound on the opposite side, which is called the join, X with this symbol, Y, and this is the same idea. Anything that's greater than both X and Y with respect to the partial ordering has to be greater than the least upper bound. Greater than or equal to. Now, so this is the idea of the last, and there are partial orderings all over the place, and we want to compare one object to another and say that one is somehow dominates the other. Many times this partial ordering also is a lattice, means that it has greatest lower bound and least upper bound. Algebraically, it's equivalent to saying that we have these two operations join, and they satisfy the idempotent law that X equals X, and also X join X equals X, and then it has this commutative law, so X meets Y equals 1 and X. It's the same idea, it's just changing all X meets to Y. It's associative. And also, one more thing is absorption, and this is the thing that so both meet and join are commutative associative by impotent. Also, it's absorptive, which means that if you take the meat of X with X joined with Y, you get X, and now you take the join of X with the meat of X and Y, you get X. So now, algebraically, if you take any system that satisfies these axioms, you also can refine a partial ordering, and this turns out to be very bound. Well, this is all abstract, so I want to get into concrete stuff, and today we're talking about lattices of trees. So we want to find partial ordering on trees, so that we can say that if you have two trees, there's a meet of these two trees, and there's a join of these two trees, which means it's the largest thing that is less than both trees, or the smallest thing that's greater than both trees, according to this ordering that we have. And so we're going to be able to take two trees and say that one is somehow bigger than another, or something. Now, actually, but the two trees are going to have the same number of nodes, the same number of vertices in the tree. And so what I want to talk about is actually three different ways to define the concept of order on trees with the same size. But we'll be able to say that one tree is somehow, shapelier than another, whatever. Some idea of the ordering on the trees. And actually, I'm not going to. And actually, I'm going to talk about forests instead of trees. Now, a forest is a bunch of trees. And in fact, we're talking ordered forest. So I'm saying a forest. Actually, I got a random forest which I found by my computer on Saturday. I wanted a random example, so I used pi, and I figured out how to find a particular forest with 10 nodes. And so here I'm going to number the nodes in the forest. I'm going to name them A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, because there are 10 nodes. And I also am arranging them so that the names of these nodes come out in what we call pre-order of the forest. Pre-order is the same order as like the the order of succession to the throne. So if these were the people who were part of British royalty or something like this would be the queen, whoever occupies the throne now, and this would be if this person dies, then this one would be next, and if that person dies, this one would be next, then the firstborn, and then that person's child, and then their firstborn, secondborn. But if all of these are dead, then then this guy comes in, and then you go actually to another line. If you ever saw Ellis Guinness movie where he actually systematically kills all the people that were ahead of him, you understand this. You understand this principle. Now, okay, so this is a forest, and it means it's a ordered set of trees, and in each family the children are also ordered too, firstborn, secondborn. Actually, a tree would be a case where there's only one, but you can always think of a forest as if it were a tree, because you can imagine that there's some parent out at the top who has A and I as the two children, and so a forest plus one node is a tree, and conversely a tree minus its root node is a forest. So I'm going to work on forest. It turns out to be a little bit nicer because the root node is always there. So I don't have to draw it. If I consider forest instead of trees. Now, the first. Now I'm going to talk about three different lattices on trees, and one of the lattices is invented by Frenchman, and I can't pronounce it correctly, so when it's French here, you can tell me, but I'm going to say tourist. Tourist, and this is 1972. Then there's another one, which was invented by Bell Canine, and here's species to compare in 1954. And then there's a third lattice on forest, which was by Richard Stanley, and this was published in 1975. So these are kind of natural ways to define ordering on trees that also turn out to give us a lattice. Now, the fact that there's so many different ways to get a lattice off of trees is a little bit confusing, because the Tamari lattice was sort of got famous as being a lattice about trees, and so when people came up with studying trees and they found some ordering that had the lattice properties, they thought they must have the Tamari lattice. But in fact, I know of several cases where people had the Stanley lattice and they thought they were dealing with the Tamari lattice and so on. Now Crewis didn't actually talk specifically about forests or trees. He had a different way of thinking about it, but it's isomorphic. He really would have talked about forests if he had, if he'd been a computer scientist. But this is what he was talking about is equivalent to forest. And I'll show you Crewis' order first, and it's this. So the first of all, we have the Crewis lattice. And this says, and we have to define a partial ordering between two forests. So we say that F is Crewis less than or equal to G. This is my symbol here for Crewis less than or equal. This will mean that if X and Y are siblings, members of the same family in G, then they also in F, then they're also siblings in F. Okay. They are also siblings in F. So, in other words, it's all based on who are the members of the same family of the same generation. So, in this case, for example, the sibling, B has no siblings. C has no siblings, is only child. D and H are siblings, E is only child, F and G are siblings. A and I are considered siblings because they're roots of the two trees, and we imagine that there's some parent out there who has A and I. So A and I are considered siblings. If we look at the nodes, we don't really have to have labels on these nodes. This A, B, C. I'm just doing this for convenience so I can talk about a node. But actually, A is always the node that's first in pre-order. B is always the node that's second in pre-order. C is always the third, and so on. So what it says that anything that if the third and eighth nodes in pre-order are siblings in G, then in F also the third and eighth nodes should be siblings. And I can show you the way Plurus himself drew this lattice. So it's conventional to have a lattice diagram where we put the smallest element at the bottom and the largest element at the top. And he was listing here only the family, the siblings.
Come together again in a different time or place. Again, however, there is no rigid rule. Come together again in a different time or place. Again, however, there is no rigid rule. Some families are literally reincarnations of their ancestors, but this is not the general case by any means. Deep relationships will continue in one way or another. Others will simply disappear. The point I want to make is that the opportunity for development and knowledge is as present at this moment in this life as it will ever be. If you ignore day-by-day opportunities for development now, no one can force you to accept and utilize greater abilities after death or between lives. The teachers are there in after-death experience, but there are also teachers here in your existence now. Some families come together in a particular life not because of great attraction or love in a past existence, but for the opposite reason. Families may be composed, then, of individuals who disliked each other in the past and come together in a close relationship where they are to work together toward a common goal, learn to understand each other better, and work out problems in a different kind of context. Jointly, each generation has its own purpose. It is this, to perfect inner knowledge, and to materialize it as faithfully as possible outward into the world. The changing physical scene throughout the centuries, as you know them, represents the inner images that have flickered through the minds of the individuals who lived within the world through the various ages. It is not necessary that you learn about your own past lives, though it may be helpful if you understand that you chose the circumstances of your birth this time. If you examine your own life now carefully, the challenges that you have set for yourself will become apparent. This is not easy to do, but it is within the grasp of each individual. If you release yourself from hatred, then you automatically release yourself from any such relationships in the future, or any experiences that are based upon hatred. Knowing your reincarnational background, but not knowing the true nature of your present self, is useless. You cannot justify or rationalize present circumstances by saying, "This is because of something I did in a past life," for within yourself now is the ability to change negative influences. You may have brought negative influences into your life for a given reason, but the reason always has to do with understanding, and understanding removes those influences. You cannot say, "The poor are poor simply because they chose poverty, and therefore there is no need for me to help them." This attitude can easily draw poverty to you in the next experience. Each individual is not at the same level of achievement even at the end of the reincarnational cycle. Some possess certain qualities that do not find a counterpart within human experience. Physical existence itself has a different effect upon various individuals. Some find it an excellent medium of expression and development. They are suited to it. They have the knack for expressing themselves in physical ways and objectifying inner feelings faithfully. Others find this difficult, and yet these same individuals may do much better in other levels of reality. There are hardy souls who thrive in physical reality, and who may have difficulties acclimating to other non-physical areas of activity. In all of these areas, however, deep spiritual or emotional contexts are never negated. Very close friends from past lives, who are in a position to do so often communicate with you when you are in a dream state, and the relationships are continued though you do not realize it consciously. On an unconscious basis, you are aware of the birth into physical life of someone you have known in the past. The strangers that you meet in your dreams are often, of course, people now alive, contemporaries, that you have also known in past lives. They are also passing relationships, contacts made and then dropped. A mate from any given life, for example, may or may not represent someone with whom you have a deep abiding tie, and again you may marry someone because of highly ambiguous feelings from a past life and choose a married relationship that is not based upon love, though love may emerge. Twins, incidentally, almost always involve very deep, abiding psychic relationships of a strong, sometimes obsessive nature. I am speaking now of identical twins. Reincarnational goals also vary greatly. I want to stress that reincarnation is a tool used by personalities. They each use it in their own way. Some enjoy female existences, or have greater fondness for male lives. While both must be encountered, there is a great range of choice and activity. Some personalities will have difficulties along certain lines, and develop with relative ease in other ways. Predetermination is never involved, for the challenge and circumstances are chosen. Some problems may be put off, for example, for several existences. Some personalities want to solve their strongest problems and get them over with, perhaps in a series of rather trying existences and exaggerated circumstances. Others of a more placid nature will take their problems one at a time. Rest periods may also be taken, and they are highly therapeutic. For example, an excellent, satisfying life with a minimum of problems may be chosen either as a prelude to a life of concentrated challenge or as a self-adopted reward for a previous difficult life. Those that thoroughly enjoy the physical medium, without being obsessed by it, however, do very well indeed. The laws of reincarnation are adapted by the individual personalities to suit themselves. Chapter 13. Reincarnation, Dreams, and the Hidden Male and Female Within the Self. As I mentioned earlier, each person lives both male and female lives. As a rule, conscious memory of these is not retained. To prevent an over-identification of the individual with his present sex, within the male there resides an inner personification of femaleness. This personification of femaleness in the male is the true meaning of what Jung called the anima. The anima in the male is, therefore, the psychic memory and identification of all the previous female existences in which the inner self has been involved. It contains within it the knowledge of the present male's past female histories and the intuitive understanding of all the female qualities with which the personality is innately endowed. The anima, therefore, is an important safeguard, preventing the male from over-identifying with whatever cultural male characteristics have been imposed upon him through present background, environment, and education. The anima serves not only as a personal but as a mass civilizing influence, mellowing strongly aggressive tendencies and serving also as a bridge both in communicating with women in a family relationship, and in communication also as it is applied through the arts and verbalization. The male will often dream of himself, therefore, as a female. The particular way in which he does so can tell him much about his own reincarnational background in which he operated as a female. Maleness and femaleness are obviously not opposites, but merging tendencies. The priestess, the mother, the young witch, the wife, and the old wise woman, these general types are archetypes, simply because they are root elements representing, symbolically, the various kinds of so-called female qualities and the various kinds of female lives that have been lived by males. They have also been lived by females, of course. However, the women do not need to be reminded of their femaleness, but again, so that they do not over-identify with their present sex, there is what Jung called the animus, or the hidden male within the woman. Again, however, this represents the male live with which the self has been involved, the young boy, the priest, the aggressive jungle man, and the wise old man. These are types, representing generally and symbolically past male lives lived by present women. Women, therefore, can learn much about their reincarnational past as men, through studying those dreams in which these types appear, or in which they themselves appear as men. Through the anima and the animus, so-called, present personalities are able to draw upon the knowledge and intuitions and background that was derived from past existences as the opposite sex. On some occasions, for example, the woman may go overboard and exaggerate female characteristics, in which case the animus or male within comes to her aid, bringing through dream experiences an onrush of knowledge that will result in compensating mole-like reactions. The same applies to a male when he over-identifies with what he believes to be male characteristics, for whatever reason. The anima or woman within will rouse him to make compensating actions, causing an upsurge of intuitive abilities, bringing a creative element to offset aggressiveness. Ideally, left alone, these operations would result in a balance individually and omnis, where aggressiveness was always used creatively, as indeed it can and should be. The animus and the anima are, of course, highly charged psychically, but the origin of this psychic charge and the inner fascination are the result of a quite legitimate inner identification with these personified other sex characteristics. They not only have a reality in the psyche, however, but they are embedded in genetically codified data by the inner self, a genetic memory of past psychic events, transposed into the genetic memory of the very cells that compose the body. Each inner self, adopting a new body, imposes upon it and upon its entire genetic makeup.
You never could take enough data into consideration. The data for a decision in any given situation is infinite. So what you do is, you go through the motions of thinking out what you will do about this. And then when the time comes to act, you make a snap judgment. I mean, I'm speaking a little extremely, making some fun of it, and so on, because after all, we do occasionally get the vague outlines of things and make a right decision on rational grounds. But we fortunately forget the variables that could have interfered with this coming out right. It's amazing how often it works. But warriors are people who think of all the variables beyond their control and what might happen. So then when you make a decision, and it works out all right, I think very little of it has much to do with your conscious intent and control. But somehow or other, you are able to decide and control things more harmoniously if you delegate authority. That's why very great businessmen are those who can delegate authority. Trust others to work for them. Because those are people developing businesses on the same basic structure that is fundamental to a living organism. Delegation of authority. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. And you see, then, what is happening is this. The more you let go of it and trust it, as if it were quite other than you. The more you realize the inseparable identity of self and other. To go back, if you try to find the identity of self and other by subjecting other to self. No go. If, on the other hand, you find it through giving self, that is control, over to other, and trusting that, you may make a mistake. You may make a bad gamble. But in the long run, you're acting on a principle which has the backing of evolution. This is the way biological evolution goes on. Constant delegation of authority. That's why, obviously, the democracy is superior to the monarchy. It was de Tocqueville who said that democracy is always right, but for the wrong reasons. Because there is operating in a democracy the principle that Buckminster Fuller calls synergy. And synergy is the intelligence of a highly complex system, the nature of which is always unknown to the individual members. Because that goes back again to this point, that we're always entering a new environment. We don't ever know fully what the new environment is, because the only environments we know are the past ones. There is always then operating in the development of cellular life on any level a new way of organization, higher than any existing form, and we are not aware of it until after it's happened. If you ever saw, for example, the film Kon-Tiki, this man figured out a few things as to how to make a balsa wood raft to sail from South America to the Pacific Islands. But once he had set this in motion, he discovered that all sorts of unexpected factors cooperated with him. That when the wood got wet, it expanded so that the ties bit into it and held it completely secure. He had never expected that. And he found that as he sailed along, a flying fish would simply alight flat on the deck every morning for breakfast. That all kinds of natural factors, it was just, he had touched a key where he was flowing with the course of nature, and everything cooperated. Because he had touched the key, he'd made the act of faith. And he was just picking up, in other words, a practice which had been hundreds and hundreds of years ago had been followed by others who had worked it out by their great ecological awareness. So we do come out of this way of thinking to something which has, I would say, the most enormously creative and revolutionary social consequences.
Come together again in a different time.